Hello and thanks for joining us. Today on Encore, we're meeting a literary great. This vastly celebrated Irish author has won or been shortlisted for almost every English language literary prize. Several of his books, like Brooklyn, have been adapted for the silver screen. The Blackwater Lightship and The Testament of Mary have been translated into 30 languages. The latter brings to life the Virgin Mary. As a play, it's been shown in Dublin and Broadway. It attracted a Tony nomination, as well as Christian protests. It's about to hit the stage in Paris. Let's meet Colm Tóibín. Colm, hello.
Hi.
Welcome to the show. Now, The Testament of Mary was first performed in Dublin in 2011. Then you took it to Broadway 2 years later, where it had huge acclaim, but also Christian protests. When Martin Scorsese's film, The Last Temptation of Christ, where he humanised Jesus, was shown here in Paris 30 years ago, it was firebombed. What sort of reception are you expecting for your play?
Well, in Ireland, people were very respectful. I think that people realised that I wasn't mocking anybody, that this was a serious exploration of something, which was essentially the silence of Mary, that Mary in the New Testament hardly speaks at all. And one wonders if in old age, if she did speak, what would she say? What would her voice be like? What would her memory be? And so the novel and then the play are explorations of that idea that once, just once, say, when she's 80, when she's nothing to lose, she suddenly decides, right, it's my time to speak. Everyone else has been speaking, now me. And so that was the idea then in both the theatre and in the book.
Well, The Testament of Mary is raw, it's anguished, and it's human. The audio version is narrated by Meryl Streep. Let's take a listen.
They think I do not see the point of their questions, and do not notice the cruel shadow of exasperation that comes hooded in their faces or hidden in their voices when I say something vague or foolish, something which leads us nowhere, when I seem not to remember what they think I must remember. They are too locked into their vast and insatiable needs and too dulled by the remnants of a terror we all felt then to have noticed that I remember everything.
Is there a Mary in particular, or a woman in particular, that you were inspired by?
No, it was the voice. It was finding a tone for her which was sort of relentless, fearless, which didn't take prisoners, that really, because she only was going to speak once, that was going to be quite fierce, and it wasn't sort of anecdotal as much as very, very concentrated. And I suppose I was taking my bearings from the portraits of Mary by certain painters, a sort of, the dark, grieving figure.
Well, Mary, the mother of Jesus, has been depicted thousands of times over the years by the likes of Leonardo da Vinci, Martin Scorsese and Mel Gibson. Take a look. Lots of different Marys there.
Yeah, the Tintoretto is particularly strong. I found that very, very useful. It's in Venice, and it shows just how untidy the whole thing might have been. Instead of being a single event that everybody was sort of shoeing horses or making food while the whole thing was going on, I got quite a lot of inspiration from both the Titian that's in Venice and the Tintoretto. I would go between them, sort of looking at them, trying to work out how I would deal with this.
Mary is the most famous mother of all, but there are lots of mothers in your works. Your book, Nora Webster, draws on memories of your father's death when you were a child. Is Nora Webster your mother?
It's an autobiography, yeah. It's my memory. It's my attempt to reconstruct something. It's often much harder to write autobiographical work than it is fiction, because you have to put shape on it. So it took me years to do. I mean, I really worked on that book for about 14 years to try and see was there any way I could find an arc rather than a single line. And but yes, it is based on what happened in the house, but viewed by me as I was trying to imagine what she was thinking, what she was doing. It's hard with a 12-year-old boy because there's not enough sensibility. There are not enough choices and chances to tell the story from my point of view. So I told it from hers.
I've read that when you were younger, you avoided reading Irish books at all costs. Now you've ended up writing them. Ireland has changed enormously over the past few years with the era that's come and gone of the Celtic Tiger. Gay marriage has now been legalised. What does it mean to be an Irish writer in 2017?
I think there's always been a very important relationship between the writer and the society, enough that they banned us, and there was a great deal of censorship until the 60s. But because we don't have Hollywood, because we don't have a great tradition in the visual arts or classical music, that the novelist, figures such as Edna O'Brien and John McGahern have been really central figures in the remaking of Ireland, in contemporary Ireland, and then that's been continued by a good number of novelists. So it's quite an interesting place to be a novelist, because people almost read your books as though they're a mixture on one hand of gossip, but on the one hand of a sort of public document. So that, it's not. Being a novelist in Ireland is not being on the margins of anywhere.
You also write screenplays. You co-wrote Return to Montauk with the German director Volker Schlondorf. He won the Palme d'Or in Cannes years ago, in 1979. We're coming up to this year's Cannes Film Festival. This year, the head of the jury is Pedro Almodovar. He's someone you've actually written about in your book, Love in a Dark Time, Gay Lives from Wilde to Almodovar, and it involved an interesting tennis match. Yeah,
I decided I needed to see him doing something other than making films or talking about his work. So we went and played tennis together. Now he was at that time, he doesn't play as much now, but he was a really good player. But he played like a rock. He missed nothing. He hit the ball hard, and it gives you and there was no real flourish in the way he played. It was quite tough, and it gave you a sense of him as a worker, as someone who goes home every 2 years, writes his screenplay, gets everything absolutely right, prepares everything for work. That he isn't somebody. He's very, very funny when he's outdoors. He can be hilarious, but he's also someone who spends a great deal of time alone, working, getting things right. So it was like playing against a wall sometimes. It really was. And his forehand especially was extremely strong. He's got very strong shoulders, and and also he can play in the heat, which is because he's used to it. But it gave you a sense of him as someone very, very determined, as well as the sort of social figure that I knew, who's very, very funny and amusing, but in another part of him is quite steely and determined.
So throughout your works, you've written about various characters, Irish characters, Greek characters, in your new book, House of Names, Mary, the Mother of God. Do you ever see yourself writing French characters?
I don't know. They were so important at a certain point. The novels of Sartre, the novels of Camus, Simone de Beauvoir. So all of that world made such a difference to me. And indeed Hemingway's description of Paris and Henry James being in Paris. So, an Irishman in Paris. Has anyone written that yet?
We're going to finish the show with some music of your choice. Tell us about your pick.
Recently in New York, I went to see in Carnegie Hall a French quartet called the Quartet à Bene, and I think they're the new rock and roll. I think they're going to be the Rolling Stones of string quartets. They're young, and they make this extraordinarily beautiful sound as a quartet. And they have this new CD of it's the Schubert Quintet, and then they have some songs they've arranged for their quintet with Matthias Goerner, the great German singer. But I think they're hot. They certainly in New York really wowed the audience. Okay, well, Colm, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much for being here. And the Testament of Mary opens in Paris this week at the Théâtre de l'Europe. And Colm Tóibín's book, House of Names, is out now. Remember our website. We're also on Twitter and Facebook. There's more news coming up on France 24 after this.
Revisited, presented by Stuart Norval.
Nicaragua, 1979. The Sandinista revolution overthrows the pro-American government. Their leader is Daniel Ortega. In 1985, the former guerrilla warrior is elected president on a heavily Marxist platform.
Estamos muy bien atendidos, gracias a Dios y al gobierno actual que ha restituido muchas actividades sociales, económicas, para que estamos muy bien.
Daniel Ortega was a popular commander from the beginning. 40 years later, what remains of his ideals?
La revolución era una poesía, era un amor en los años 80. Hoy lo que vemos es una dinastía familiar. Todo aquello que combatió, todo aquello que criticó, todo aquello que cuestionó, ellos lo han hecho.
Revisited on France 24 and France24.com.